Callum Monroe was halfway through a dull conversation with a hedge fund manager he barely tolerated when he caught the sound of laughter sharp, mocking, too loud for a room like this. He turned his head instinctively. The ballroom of the Langford Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers, every corner dripping in gold and overdone elegance. The annual Everstone Foundation Gala, same overpriced hors d'oeuvres, same back-patting billionaires, but the laughter had come from a different energy meter. Across the room, near the bar, a woman stood stiffly between two overdressed couples. She wore a navy cocktail dress, modest and clearly not designer. Her hair was pinned up in a soft twist, and her expression was frozen in polite discomfort as the group around her chuckled. "No offense, but you don't exactly look like you belong here," one woman was saying, swirling her champagne with a painted-on smile. "Are you someone's plus one, or are you what staff?" the man beside her added. She probably snuck in. Security's been terrible tonight. Callum didn't think. He moved. "Actually," he said, stepping between them and the woman. "She's with me." All four turned to him. The woman's eyes widened, her lips parting like she was about to correct him. He gave her the smallest shake of his head. The couple blinked. "Callum," the man said. "Didn't know you were seeing someone." "We met recently," Callum said smoothly, "and she's the only interesting person I've talked to all night." The woman beside him blinked again, then suddenly thankfully smiled. "Well," she said, glancing at the couple. "Guess I do belong then," Callum chuckled lightly. "More than most people here," the rude woman's smile faltered. "Well, enjoy the rest of your night." They walked off quickly, and Callum turned to look at the woman he'd just defended. She looked like she was trying hard not to gape. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice low. "That was unexpected. I didn't mean to drag you into that." He tilted his head. "You didn't drag me anywhere. They were rude. You handled it well." She gave a breathy laugh. "I was about 2 seconds from telling them off. Probably would have gotten thrown out." "I'd have made sure you didn't," he said, then extended his hand. "Callum Monroe," she hesitated, then took it. "Celia Morgan." He held her hand a second longer than necessary. "Nice to meet you, Celia," she nodded, then pulled her hand back. "So, you're someone important, I take it," he shrugged. "Depends who you ask." She raised a brow. "You just told those people I was with you." "I figured it would shut them up." "And now what?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Are you going to pretend we're dating for the rest of the night?" He grinned. "Only if you want to." Her lips quirked. "You're enjoying this a little." She looked around. "You're not like the others here." "Is that a compliment?" She tilted her head. "You don't carry yourself like someone who needs to prove anything." He studied her. "And you don't carry yourself like someone who needs to be rescued, but I did it anyway." She smiled, genuinely this time. "Well, thank you." A waiter passed by. Callum grabbed 2 glasses of champagne and handed one to her. "Now that we're officially each other's excuse for surviving this awful party, want to get out of here?" Her eyes widened. "Leave? You're one of the hosts, aren't you?" "One of the sponsors," he corrected. "Which means I can disappear and no one will say a word." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I'd rather be somewhere real, and you seem real." She stared at him for a second, then took the glass. "All right, let's go." They slipped out through a side hallway and down the back stairs. The valet didn't blink when Callum handed over his ticket. A sleek black Aston Martin pulled up seconds later. Celia's eyebrows hit the sky. "This is yours." He opened the door for her. "It's a car. It's an Aston Martin." "So you know your cars." She slid in, still staring at him. "You don't exactly scream millionaire," he chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." They drove through the glittering city until they reached the rooftop of a private hotel he owned downtown. It was closed to the public, but Callum had the key. The view stretched out in every direction: skyline, stars, the hum of a city that never slept. Celia stepped to the edge, her breath catching. "Wow. I come up here when I need to feel like I'm not stuck in that other world," he said. She turned to him. "So you admit it, fancy parties, luxury cars, rich people pretending to like each other. It's all fake." "Not all of it," he said. "But enough to make this feel better." She stepped closer, her eyes on his. "You don't know me. I know enough." She raised a brow. "Like what?" "That you're kind. That you didn't fight back because you didn't want to stoop to their level. That you're strong enough to laugh even when people try to knock you down. And that you're not impressed by money." She stared at him, stunned for a second. You really don't know what to do with someone who doesn't care about your bank account, do you? He smiled. Not a clue. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up with nothing, building his company from scratch. She told him about working 3 jobs to support her mom's medical bills. They laughed over bad dates and shared favorite books. She teased him for wearing cufflinks, and he teased her for her obsession with late-night diner coffee. At some point, he reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear she didn't pull away. I didn't expect tonight to end like this, she whispered. Me neither, he said softly, and then he kissed her. It was slow, careful, then full of something neither of them expected. Her hands found his shoulders, his arms wrapped around her waist. The city stretched out below them, but they only saw each other when they finally pulled apart. She leaned her forehead against his. This is insane. Yeah, he whispered, but it feels right. She nodded. What happens now? He smiled. I walk you to the car, I drive you home, and tomorrow I take you to dinner, a real one. She gave him a look. Not some boring charity event, God, no. I'm thinking something where the food actually tastes good. She laughed. Okay, yeah, she said, smiling. I'd like that. He reached for her hand again and held it tight. Celia, I don't know what this is yet, but I don't want it to be just one night. She looked up at him, her eyes soft. Me neither. And Callum, who had walked into that gala expecting nothing but another forgettable evening, realized with a strange ache in his chest he was already falling. Celia shut the door of her apartment behind her, then leaned against it with her eyes closed, her heartbeat still racing like she'd just stepped off a roller coaster. The street outside was quiet now, the soft purr of Callum's car already fading into the distance. She hadn't expected him to walk her all the way up to her building, let alone wait until she was safely inside before driving off. That kind of consideration wasn't something she was used to. She kicked off her shoes and padded into the kitchen, flicking on the light. A half-written grocery list sat on the counter beside a chipped ceramic mug she hadn't had time to wash. She was supposed to be budgeting for next week's meals, finishing her freelance pitch and prepping for another 12-hour shift at the clinic tomorrow. Instead, her mind was stuck on the way he'd looked at her. Like she wasn't just someone who'd wandered into a world she didn't belong in. She opened the fridge, stared blankly inside, then closed it again. Her stomach was too tight to eat. With a sigh, she grabbed a blanket from the back of the couch and curled up by the window, watching the city lights blink in the distance. The last man she'd trusted had walked away the second things got complicated. And Callum, he wasn't just complicated, he was from another universe entirely. But when he'd said he didn't want it to be one night, she'd believed him. The next evening, Celia stood outside a small restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a record shop. The windows glowed with golden light, and the scent of garlic and lemon drifted out into the cool spring air. She adjusted the strap of her purse and checked the time again. Sorry, I'm late, came a voice behind her. She turned to see Callum approaching, his jacket slung casually over one shoulder, his sleeves rolled up just enough to show the edge of a watch that probably cost more than her rent. I got stuck on a call, she smiled. You're only 5 minutes late. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind. I told you I'd be here, he said, holding the door open for her. And I don't go back on promises. The hostess greeted him with a nod of familiarity and led them to a quiet table near the back, where the candlelight flickered against brick walls and shelves lined with dusty wine bottles. No one stared, no one whispered. It wasn't some exclusive socialite restaurant, just a cozy place with real food and mismatched chairs. I've never been here, she said as they sat. How'd you find it? I used to come here when I was still figuring things out, he said. Before anyone cared what name was on the check. You mean before they tried to impress you? Something like that. A waiter appeared and poured water into their glasses. Callum glanced at the menu but didn't open it. Let me guess, Celia said. You already know what you want. I always get the same thing here, but you should try whatever sounds good. She scanned the options. Okay, but if you order something better than me, I'm stealing bites. That's a dangerous game. I don't share food easily. Then you'll learn, she said, her eyes glinting. He leaned back, watching her. You're different. From who? Everyone I've met in the last 10 years, the waiter returned. Callum ordered without looking, and Celia chose a lemon risotto that made her mouth water just reading it. When the waiter walked away, she tilted her head. So what do you do when you're not crashing charity galas and rescuing strangers? I run a few companies, most of them in tech. Some investments, a few startups I help mentor. That's vague, he smiled slightly. It's complicated, I don't always enjoy talking about it. Why not? Because people change when they hear numbers. They start calculating instead of listening. She nodded slowly. You think I'm calculating? No, he said. That's why I'm here. The food arrived, and for a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. She was halfway through her second bite when she set her fork down. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you stepped in at the gala. Why did you really do it? He looked down at his plate. Because I've been in rooms full of people who smile with their teeth and cut with their words, and I've seen what it does to someone who's just trying to hold their ground. She took a sip of water, letting that settle. That's a heavy reason for someone who barely knew me. I didn't need to know you to see how wrong it was. She studied him. You weren't just defending me, you were furious. His jaw tightened. Yeah, I guess I was. She sat back. So what about you? Who defends you when they come for you? He met her eyes. No one comes for me, not anymore. That sounds lonely. He didn't respond right away, then quietly, it is. Celia felt something shift, not pity, respect. He wasn't hiding behind arrogance or charm, he was just telling the truth. When they stepped outside after dinner, the air had cooled and a light breeze tugged at her hair. Callum offered his jacket, and for once she didn't argue. He walked beside her down the quiet street, hands in his pockets. Do you ever miss it? She asked. Before the success. The quiet, sometimes, but I don't regret where I am. Even if it means everyone expects something from you, I don't mind expectations, he said. I just hate assumptions. They stopped beside her building. She hesitated, then turned to face him. This was nice. Really nice. I'm glad you came. She looked up at him. I'm not used to this, neither am I. A long pause stretched between them. Then, slowly, he reached out and brushed his fingers against hers. Can I see you again? She nodded. You already are. He stepped back, his expression unreadable. Tomorrow, I have work all day, but maybe after, I'll wait. She held his gaze a moment longer, then turned and climbed the stairs to her door. This time, she didn't look back. Inside, she leaned against the wall, jacket still around her shoulders, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Something was happening, something real, and for once, she wasn't running from it. The rain started as a whisper against the windows of the quiet jazz lounge, a steady rhythm that barely registered beneath the soft croon of the saxophone. Celia leaned forward, her elbows resting on the edge of their small table, watching Callum across the flickering candlelight as he adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal shirt. He looked different here, less guarded, less polished, and yet no less magnetic. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm trying to figure you out, she replied. He lifted his gaze, eyes steady. Any progress? Not really, she admitted. You're like one of those paintings people argue about for decades. Everyone sees something different. I've heard worse metaphors. She smiled faintly. You always this hard to pin down? Only when I don't trust easy answers. A waitress dropped off 2 drinks, a delicate lavender cocktail for her, something aged and smoky for him. Celia took a small sip, letting the flavor settle on her tongue before she asked, What's the real reason you left your last relationship? Callum didn't flinch. She wanted someone who could be molded, someone predictable. I tried to be what she needed. It didn't work. She didn't want you the way you are. She wanted the version of me she imagined when she saw the Forbes profile, not the man under the suit. Celia stirred her drink. Is that why you keep people at a distance? He considered her question for a moment. I've learned not everyone wants the truth, most want the fantasy. I don't, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I don't need you to impress me, I just want you to be honest. Callum leaned forward, the candlelight catching in his eyes. Then I'll tell you something I haven't said out loud in years. I'm afraid of becoming the kind of man who forgets how to feel, she blinked. Why would you think that? Because I've watched it happen to people I once respected. They bury their instincts beneath strategy. success turns into armor. And eventually they forget who they were before everyone wanted something from them. Celia sat back, studying him. "You're not like that, not yet," he said. "But sometimes I wonder how close I've come." The band shifted into a slower tune, the kind that curled around your thoughts and slowed your breathing. Celia reached across the table and laid her hand over his. "Let me ask you something now," he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Why were you really at the gala?" Her fingers tensed just slightly. "I was delivering a last-minute catering order for a friend. Someone bailed and she asked me to help. I wasn't supposed to be seen." He tilted his head. "You didn't sneak in." "No," she said, her tone dry. "But I also wasn't on the guest list. And when those people cornered you, you were alone." "I was used to it," she said. "People like that assume if you don't fit their mold, you're disposable." Callum's jaw tightened. "They underestimated you. They always do," she said. "Which is sometimes useful." He looked into her eyes. "You carry that like armor." "I learned early it was better to expect nothing than be disappointed." "Who taught you that?" "My father," she said, her voice softening. "He left when I was 12, promised he'd come back." "Never did." Callum didn't speak for a beat. "Then that kind of wound doesn't fade." "No," she agreed, "but it teaches you to stand on your own." She pulled her hand back, suddenly needing space to breathe. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "That I'll let myself hope. And that you'll turn out to be like everyone else." "I won't," he said without hesitation. "You can't know that." "I can know what I feel right now," he said, "and I can choose not to run from it." The words hung between them as the music faded into silence. They left the lounge just after midnight, the rain now falling in slow, deliberate drops that slid down the collar of Callum's coat. He held an umbrella above them both as they walked along the empty street, her heels clicking quietly against the wet pavement. "I've never had someone look at me like you do," she said, her voice low. "How do I look at you?" "Like I'm not a mistake waiting to happen." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "You're not." "I feel like I might be," she whispered. He reached up, gently brushing damp strands from her cheek. "You're the most unexpected thing that's ever happened to me, Celia, and I've never been more certain about anything." She didn't answer. She just stood there, letting the rain soak into her sleeves, heart unguarded for the first time in years. He leaned down, kissing her again deeper this time. No hesitation, no curiosity, just certainty. When they finally pulled apart, she looked up at him, breathless. "What happens if this gets complicated?" "Then we figure it out." She nodded slowly, then stepped closer. "I want to trust this." "Then do," he said. "I won't let you fall alone." She looked at him a long moment, then reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. "Okay." He walked her to her door again, this time not letting go until the very last second. And when she looked back, she found him still standing there in the rain, watching her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. Neither of them knew exactly what they were stepping into. But neither of them wanted to turn away. Celia stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, her arms folded against the crisp evening breeze. String lights hung overhead, swaying gently between wrought iron arches and clusters of soft white flowers. She could hear jazz floating up from the courtyard below, mingling with the scent of rosemary and lemon blossoms. The party was in full swing, but her thoughts were elsewhere, anchored by the weight of the envelope still sitting in her purse. She heard footsteps behind her and turned just as Callum stepped into the light. His jacket was open, shirt collar loose, as though he hadn't bothered to fix it after stepping away from the crowd. "You disappeared," he said, his voice low. "I needed air." He stepped beside her, gaze scanning the skyline. "You've been quiet all night." "I got something today," she said. "From my mother's attorney. The hospital bills there worse than I thought." Callum didn't speak. His attention never left her. She let out a breath. "I don't want your help. That's not why I told you." "I know that," he said evenly, "but I want to help anyway." She shook her head. "If you do, it changes things." "How?" "Because then I'm not just the woman you met on accident. I become someone you saved." He turned to her. "You think I see you like that?" "I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid you will." Callum reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. He handed it to her without explanation. She opened it slowly. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, ideas, some scribbled, some detailed business concepts, graphs, even little quotes in the margins. She flipped to the first page. Start ugly. Finish strong, she read aloud. I wrote that when I was living in a one-bedroom apartment with a broken heater, he said. Everything I've done since then came from that. She looked up. Why are you showing me this? Because you think I only know how to give people things. But I built all of this because I had to fight for every inch, and I see that in you. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. I didn't know you used to draw. I don't anymore. I lost the habit when things got loud. She tucked the notebook against her chest. You didn't lose it. You just buried it, he smiled faintly. Maybe, below them, the crowd burst into applause. A toast, maybe. She didn't look. I don't want to be something that fits into your life like a polished puzzle piece, Celia said. I want to be seen for the parts that don't fit. Callum leaned back against the railing. You're not a puzzle piece. You're the first thing that's ever made the rest of it make sense. Her throat tightened. What if I'm too messy for all this? Then I'll meet you in the mess, he said. But I'm not walking away. She stared at him, her fingers still wrapped around the notebook. Why me? He stepped closer. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm not pretending. And because I've never wanted anything more than I want to know what we could be if we stopped being afraid. She didn't move, but her voice cracked. I'm scared. So am I, he whispered, but I'm not going anywhere. Her shoulders dropped, the fight draining from her posture. If I let you in, I need to know you're not going to decide later I'm inconvenient. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She recognized the Everstone Foundation logo at the top. This is the invite list for tonight. I had your name added last week, but I never RSVP'd. You didn't have to. I wanted you here, not as a guest, as the person I wanted beside me. She stared at the paper, then met his eyes. You planned this. Not all of it, he said. But I knew if I didn't make a space for you in my world, I was going to lose you. Her voice was quiet. And what if I'm still figuring out how to let someone fight for me? Then we take it one step at a time, he said. Together, a soft wind moved between them, brushing her skirt against his leg. She moved forward slowly until her fingers found his. I don't want perfect, she said. I just want real. Callum brought her hand to his chest. Then you've got all of me. They stood like that, the city stretching out behind them as the night softened around them. Later, when the party thinned and laughter drifted farther away, Callum led her down the garden steps and into a private wing of the building. He opened a door to a room lit by low golden lamps and walls lined with canvases. Celia blinked. What is this? It used to be a storage space. I turned it into a studio last year. I haven't used it. I didn't know what for. She stepped inside, her voice hushed. It's beautiful. He handed her a small wrapped box from the shelf. Open it. Inside was a set of charcoal pencils and a blank sketchbook. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, she said. Whatever you want, he replied. Paint, write, design, or nothing. It's yours. She looked up at him. You built a space for me. I built it for the person who reminded me how to breathe, he said. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the box down and walked back to him. You said once that you didn't want this to be just one night. I meant it. She reached up and touched his face. Then let it be every night. His mouth found hers, soft and sure, and the silence between them filled with something weightless and infinite. Weeks later, the hospital bills were covered anonymously. Celia never asked, and Callum never admitted it. Instead, he helped her open a small design studio in a quiet district downtown where she could build something of her own. He never missed a Friday dinner, even when meetings ran late. She never let a day pass without reminding him what it looked like to live without armor. Together, they learned how to be vulnerable without apology, to fight without fear, to love without rules. And when Callum stood at the edge of that same rooftop garden months later, holding a ring that had never belonged to anyone else, he didn't make a speech. He just looked at her and said, I never expected to lose my heart that night, but I'm so glad I did. Celia smiled, eyes shining. Then let's keep building something we never expected. And they did. Every day, stronger than the last. Celia adjusted the hanger on the mannequin, pinning the final sketch onto the board behind it. The studio smelled faintly of linen and graphite, the floor peppered with fabric swatches and open portfolios. Afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, catching on the soft gold of her necklace, the one Callum had given her 2 months earlier after her first official design launch. She hadn't taken it off since. "Are you planning to eat today?" called a familiar voice from behind her, "or are you going to pretend that crackers and coffee count as lunch again?" Celia turned to see her friend and assistant, Mariah, standing with her hands on her hips and a bag of takeout in one hand. "I was in the zone," Celia said, brushing her hair away from her face. "This deadline won't move itself." Mariah set the food down and dropped onto the couch. "You've been in the zone for 5 hours. Even geniuses need sustenance." Celia grinned, finally stepping back from the mannequin. "Fine. 10-minute break. You said that an hour ago." "I meant it more this time." As she sat and opened the takeout container, her phone buzzed once on the side table. Callum's name appeared on the screen and her heart lifted automatically. He'd been in Zurich all week consulting on a global acquisition deal, something involving renewable infrastructure, which he'd explained with too much technical detail and too little sleep. Mariah glanced over. "He's still due back tonight," Celia nodded. "He lands around 9. "You excited?" Celia hesitated, her expression softer now. "It's not just that I miss him. It's the way everything feels easier when he's nearby, like I can breathe more deeply." Mariah smiled. "You're in deep. I know." Later that evening, Celia stood in front of the mirror in her studio's small washroom, smoothing the fabric of her dress. It wasn't flashy, just something simple, pale green, draped at the waist, but it was the one Callum had complimented when he'd seen her sketch it months ago, saying it looked like confidence in motion. She'd never forgotten that. When she arrived at the penthouse, the elevator doors opened directly into the living room. The lights were low, the air scented with cedarwood and something faintly citrus. She stepped inside cautiously, expecting to find him waiting, but instead there was silence. Then, just as she turned to call out, she noticed a trail of white envelopes on the floor, each sealed with gold wax. The first one said her name in his handwriting. She opened it. "You once said you wanted to be seen for the parts of you that didn't fit. I want you to know I see them all and I love every single one. Follow these." Inside each envelope was a single sentence. Some were memories, a line from their first rooftop night, a joke they'd shared over bad wine, a moment he'd watched her speak to a nervous intern with the kind of grace she never gave herself credit for. The last envelope sat at the edge of the balcony, propped against a small glass lantern. She stepped outside, her heels clicking softly against the stone. Callum stood on the far end, dressed in a deep navy suit, no tie, his hands in his pockets. Behind him, the skyline shimmered, but it might as well have been a blur. He was the only thing she could see. "I wanted to find the right words," he said, stepping forward, "but turns out I already wrote them in every moment we've had." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Celia's breath caught. "I didn't expect this when I met you," he said, voice steady. "I didn't plan for you to change my life, but you did. You reminded me how to feel again, and I don't want to go another day without building something permanent with you." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, rose gold, delicate, with a single oval diamond set between two slender bands that twisted like ribbon. "I love you, Celia, and I want to build a life where everything you create, everything you dream has a home with me. Will you marry me?" She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she stepped forward and took his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the second their lips met, the city disappeared. There was no crowd, no applause. Just the two of them, wrapped in the kind of stillness that only existed when something right had finally found its place. Months passed, and things moved quickly but not recklessly. They renovated the upper 2 floors of the penthouse into a shared creative space, half business, half sanctuary. Callum still traveled, but less often now. And when he did, she came with him, sketching designs on the backs of napkins at airports and learning how to sleep beside him on red-eye flights. They married in a private ceremony, just 30 people beneath an arched grove of olive trees in the south of France. No photographers, no headlines, just vows whispered in the wind, a string quartet, and the sound of waves lapping at the shore. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. She wore a gown she'd stitched herself, hand-bedded petals trailing like wind across silk. When they danced, it wasn't choreographed. It was just them messy, joyful, completely theirs. They didn't chase perfection. They chased truth. Callum learned to slow down, to miss meetings for the sake of mornings in bed and evenings spent tangled in laughter. Celia learned to let herself be supported without shame. She stopped apologizing for needing help and started asking for what she deserved. Neither of them stayed the same, but together they became something more. The first time she saw the nameplate on their building's new creative wing, the Morgan Monroe Residency, she laughed and told him it sounded like a law firm. He just kissed the top of her head and said, "It sounds like a future." And it was. Their home was filled with half-finished sketches, journals, coffee rings on marble counters, and a dog they rescued from a thunderstorm who refused to sleep anywhere but their bed. Love didn't look like a fairy tale. It looked like shared toothbrushes, late-night grocery runs, whispered confessions at 3 a.m., and a man who never stopped choosing her even when the world tried to pull them into its noise. They didn't just end up together. They built a life so full, so rich in the things that mattered, that every beginning after that was just another chapter in a story neither of them ever wanted to stop writing, and they never did.